Hello. The focus of this video is Congress, which is chapter 9 in your book, so please read the assigned pages. But I want to talk a little bit about Congress in the United States. So Congress is the lawmaking branch of our federal government. It's the legislative branch. And the main job of Congress, of course, is to pass laws for our nation, but it also has a couple of other responsibilities that are mentioned in the reading, including oversight, passing a budget, and several other things as well. But its main job is to pass laws. In the Constitution, Congress is part of Article 1. It was the first branch of government created in the Constitution. That doesn't mean it's the most important, but it does mean that the framers did spend a lot of time on this particular branch. In fact, there's more on the legislative branch than there is on the other two branches. Now, the specific powers of the legislative branch can be found in Article 1, Section 8. That is known as the enumerated powers list. Sometimes they're called delegated powers, but these are the specific grants of power that authorize Congress to pass laws. Things like taxation, regulating interstate and foreign commerce, establishing a post office, establishing a currency, that is money for the nation, creating an army and a navy, declaring war on foreign powers. So those are all some examples of powers that Congress has under the Constitution. Now, when the Constitution was established in 1787, when it was created at the Constitutional Convention, there was a debate between large and small states about how people would be represented in the Congress. So the compromise they reached, the so-called Great Compromise, was we would have a bicameral Congress. It would be made up of a House of Representatives with the people represented based on the population, and then the Senate with equal representation. So the House of Representatives is based on population to this day. There are 435 representatives in the House. They each represent a district, so that means there are 435 districts across the country. Each state gets at least one district. Most states get more than one district based on their population. And those numbers are decided every 10 years after the census. But again, each state is guaranteed a minimum of one, no matter what its population is. And then states that have more population get more representatives. The Senate, of course, is equal for each state. It always has been. So there are 2 senators per state. We have 50 states, so there's a total of 100 senators in the U.S. Senate. Now, in terms of districts or territories, so for example, Washington, D.C., or Puerto Rico, Guam, and some other American territories, they do not get voting representation in Congress. They do get non-voting delegates in Congress, but there has been an argument that the territories of the United States should get voting representation because they are citizens and they are subject to the laws of the nation, but currently they do not get voting representation in the Congress, in the House or the Senate. In terms of the House, again, the districts are decided every 10 years after the census. Most states give the state legislature the responsibility for creating the districts that the House members represent. Those districts are supposed to be equal in population. So no matter where you are in the state, you're represented. You're in a district where your representative is representing the same number of people. That's known as one person, one vote. The Supreme Court back in the early 1960s required that each district in each state be the same population. Now, if a state loses a population or its population declines as a percentage of the overall population of the country, which is something that has happened in Michigan over the last number of years, then that state loses a district. And if that happens, then the state has to redraw the boundaries to accommodate the loss of the district. So let's say you went from 15 districts to 14 districts, so you'd have to shuffle boundaries around to account for that because everybody has to live in a district and they have to be whole districts. You can't split them up. Now, Michigan did change the way it draws boundaries a few years ago. We now use a process that's handled not by the state legislature as it used to be, but by a citizens committee. When the state legislature did redistricting in our state, as it does in so many other states, it was a very partisan process. So whichever party happened to be in charge of the legislature at that point or the governorship tried to create districts to benefit their party over the opposing party. And so that's what gerrymandering is. It's creating legislative districts for partisan purposes. And the Supreme Court really has never struck that down. So states can do it. It's certainly not very fair because it's essentially politicians picking who's going to vote for them rather than the voters picking the politician. It's kind of the idea that the politicians are deciding who their constituents are going to be, who they're and then they try to give an advantage to one party over the other, and that pretty much locks in a majority for that party for a long time, unless the opposing party can somehow knock off an incumbent in a district or something. So the process that we're now using in Michigan, as in other states are starting to use, is one where a nonpartisan or a bipartisan citizens committee is going to redraw the boundaries, and hopefully that means that they'll be fair to both sides, or to all sides if you're independent. Now the redistricting process doesn't take place for the Senate because you have 2 senators per state regardless of population. There are a lot of advantages that incumbents have. Incumbents are the ones who are currently in office. And they tend to get reelected. If you're an incumbent running for reelection in the House, many times they get reelected at a 90 or 95% rate, meaning that only about 5 to 10% of incumbents lose their races. So that's quite a few people who get reelected every couple of years. House terms are 2 years, Senate terms are 6 years. But in the House, you're representing a small district. And of course, if it's a gerrymandered district, that reinforces the advantages you already have. But in addition to that, both House members and senators do get other advantages. For example, they have what's called the franking privilege. The franking privilege allows them to send out official mail at government expense so they can communicate with their constituents at home. That leads to another advantage, which is known as constituent service. So constituents are the people who live in the district. They are the people that the representative represents in the House or in the Senate. So for example, if you're a senator from Michigan, everybody who lives in the state of Michigan is your constituent, even if they did not vote for you. If you are a representative representing, say, a district in the Metro Detroit area, then your constituents are everybody who lives in your district. So it would not be the entire state of Michigan, it would be the people who live in your district, again, whether they voted for you or not. And representatives and senators make sure they pay attention to their constituents, so they have staffs of people who help them answer constituent questions or constituent problems. For example, you're a senior citizen who hasn't received your Social Security check this month. That's a federal program, a federal issue, so you might contact your U.S. representative and say, can you find out why I haven't received my check? And then the representative staff will investigate the issue and come back with an answer. You could also register your position on a bill that the Congress is considering. And again, you can contact your representative's office or one of your senator's offices. And it's always good to know who represents you. A lot of people don't know who represents them in the House and Senate, but I think it's very important that you do find out who represents you. If you want to find out who represents you in the House of Representatives, go to the website house.gov. And if you want to find out who your senators are, go to senate.gov and then look for the state or the district that you live in. In a couple of other things, of course, lawmaking, passing legislation is the most important work of Congress. Now, Congress is led by political parties, the House and the Senate. So when I say Congress, it means both the House and the Senate. And so the 2 chambers, the 2 houses, have separate leaderships. Sometimes one party is in the majority in both houses, but there are also times when one party is in the majority in one house and the opposing party is in the majority in the other house. And so in that instance, then whichever party is in the majority in each house is the one in charge. In the House of Representatives, the top leader of that body is the Speaker. She or he, depending on who the Speaker is chosen by the majority party and decides what the priorities for the House will be. In the Senate, you have a majority leader and a minority leader, and the majority decides what bills will get voted on. But in the Senate, minority party members do have a little bit more influence over the passage of bills, or at least they have ways to stop the passage of bills. The filibuster, which is discussed in Chapter 9, is one way that senators can stop a bill from being considered. They can threaten to essentially refuse to allow the Senate to move on to other business, and that's known as a filibuster. Now, filibusters could be done by a senator talking out loud, reading from the dictionary or reading from the newspaper or from a child's book, which are all ways that senators have engaged in filibusters. But a lot of times, filibusters are done just simply by the senator saying, "I'm not going to allow us to move forward," and it's a way to stop the bill. One way to stop a filibuster from being successful is for a senator to invoke what's known as cloture. Cloture requires a 3/5 majority, or 60 senators out of 100, which is not very easy to achieve. There haven't been many times in recent years when one party has had a 60-seat majority. There have been times when they've had 53 or 54-seat majorities, or as slim as 51 votes. But you need 60 votes to stop a filibuster. So that doesn't. It means that if you're in the minority and there are at least 41 of you, you probably are going to be able to stop a lot of the major priorities of the majority party. Although there are some ways to get around that, but it's not easy. Filibusters don't exist in the House. The House has tight rules. The majority party controls what's going on, and a representative cannot obstruct a bill by threatening a filibuster. But in the Senate, the senators do have that ability, so it gives a little bit more influence to the minority party than they would have in the House of Representatives. In your reading, make sure you read through the process of how a bill becomes law, the legislative process. So there are several steps in that process. The process is set up in a way that it's very difficult to pass a bill. It's not impossible, but it does try. The framers of the Constitution and then the people who kind of set the rules of Congress did not want to make it easy to pass bills, because bills, if they become law, are things that we have to follow. So they wanted to make it a situation where if it's going to make it into law, it's something that they've hopefully thought through. Now, we know that's not always the case, but that was the idea of the legislative process. A bill has to go through both the House and the Senate before it can go to the president, and the bill has to be the same in the same form, same language. So if there are any differences between the House and Senate versions, the two chambers have to work out their differences before they send the bill on to the president for his or her signature, or possibly for their veto. If the president vetoes the bill, that means they're sending it back to Congress, and then Congress can try to override the veto with a 2/3 majority, 2/3 of both houses. If they manage to do that, then the bill becomes law without the president's signature. So those are some examples of checks and balances that are built into the system to ensure that our rights are protected, and that Congress hopefully has really thought through what the bills are that they're passing. So make sure you read through that, because the legislative process is really important. That's the main thing that Congress does. And of course, the main bill they have to pass every year is the budget for the government. That's the budget process, the fiscal process. Our budget year goes into effect every October 1st. So the goal is that Congress is supposed to have budget bills and appropriations bills and revenue bills passed by the end of September every year. If that doesn't happen, then the government shuts down. And also, if Congress passes a bill for the budget, and it would be several bills, it's not just one single bill, but if they pass several bills and they send it on to the president and the president vetoes the bill, then that means the government's going to have to shut down until they can come to an agreement. It means all the tax money is there, just there's no legal authority for the government to spend it. And again, the authority to spend money rests with Congress. So if the president wants something, he has a priority, she has a priority for some health care or whatever it is, the president has to get Congress to appropriate the money for it. So again, another check and balance. But the president's check and balance is that he or she can veto a bill Congress has passed, and that. So again, there's another check and balance. So a lot of things in there, but I wanted to kind of go through that. Also look through the discussion of oversight. on how the Congress oversees the executive branch of our government, and then some of the other functions of Congress. If you have any questions, email me, and have a good week. Thanks.